right, welcome back, everybody. Now, recently, the South African Human Rights Commission made findings against a Free State school over racism claims. The Commission found that the racist remarks made by the staff members against black and coloured learners constitute a clear incident of hate speech as defined by the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, and that this act of hate speech constitutes a clear violation of both the right to equality and human dignity of the learners. To talk more about racial discrimination in schools, we are joined in studio by Kayum Ahmed, who is from the South African Human Rights Commission. He's the chief executive there. It's good to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, this incident that we saw in the Free State, is this one of many that are happening in our country?
Unfortunately, it is. In the Free State, we tend to find huge numbers of cases relating to race and racism, particularly in schools. Generally, the South African Human Rights Commission deals with approximately 10,000 cases a year, the majority of which relate to questions of race and racism. And Free State appears to be one of those provinces where we tend to find a lot of cases relating to race and racism. And very recently, the Supreme Court of Appeal, just last week, issued a finding in relation to racist behavior on the Free State University campus. So this is unfortunately something that we experience quite regularly at the Commission.
When is an incident considered a violation of human rights pertaining to schools?
Well, in the school situation, there's a very specific standard that's been set, given that you're dealing with younger people and that you're dealing with teachers who are meant to be quite experienced and to be able to recognize when these incidents of racism occurs. But of course, the general provision in relation to Section 9 of the Constitution, particularly the provision relating to equality, is what comes into play here. And so whenever a statement is made of a racist nature or which amounts to hate speech, as in this particular case, the Commission is obliged to intervene and to take certain action against the school as well as the specific individuals involved in these racist acts.
I'm scared to ask, but I mean, if we have to calculate the amount of cases that you are currently looking into right now, how many? In the Free State province alone, I know that something like 76% of our cases relate to questions of race. And of those numbers, we're probably looking at between 600 to 800 cases across the country. So there are quite a few that continue to take place on a regular basis. And unfortunately, these involve very young children. One of the cases we dealt with called the Volhof primary school case, where an 11 and 13-year-old children raised the alarm bell with their father, who eventually brought the case to us at the Commission. In this particular instance, a teacher was walking around the classroom with a mirror, holding this up to pupils, to black pupils, and asking them what they saw. And of course, the pupils were afraid, and when they refused to answer, he would shout at them that you are seeing a baboon, you're looking at a monkey. Wow. He had the old South African flag on the front of the classroom and had pictures of Honourable Julius Malema, the Member of Parliament, alongside a picture of a baboon, clearly comparing the two. So these were the kinds of things that were taking place in the school. In this particular case, the most recent one, the principal has been accused of calling young black girls little black bitches, for instance, to their faces. And so this was the culture that was taking place at this particular school. So there's a lot of endemic and systemic racism that we're coming across, being sanctioned by the highest authorities within the school system. And this is deeply problematic as far as we're concerned. It's immensely problematic. And I mean, when we hear stories like this, it just it blows my mind. And are we particularly looking, if we have to look at province specific, you're finding, and I'm feeling that the Free State is coming out tops.
Indeed. Well, the Free State is certainly one of the top provinces, but it only also means that people are a lot more aware of their rights and that they are able to lodge complaints with us at the Commission. There are other provinces such as Limpopo and Mpumalanga where these cases certainly take place, and predominantly in rural areas, but they may not be as visible as they are in places such as the Free State or in Gauteng even, or in the Western Cape.
What happens in an instance like this? Let's go back to that previous story that you were telling us. I mean, obviously, this teacher was found guilty. I mean, there's no two ways about it. What happens to him?
Indeed. So the teacher needed to have been suspended by the Provincial Department of Basic Education, which subsequently happened, as well as the principal in that particular instance, because it was found that the principal had been colluding in some ways by not acting in that particular case. But what was fascinating is that when we interviewed the children, 81% of the children we interviewed said that they had raised the alarm bell with their parents, who were predominantly black, and these were black students in a predominantly black school with white teachers. Unfortunately, not a single black parent went to lodge a complaint. They remained silent. They refused to speak out. And so it raises major questions about the psychology of black South Africans and the fact that we still sit with these issues 20 years into our democracy. It was a white father of 2 white pupils who raised the alarm bell and who eventually lodged a complaint with the Commission. And while this reflects the courage of these 2 young people who were 11 and 13 years old and their father, I think it also says a lot about the psychological condition of black South Africans 20 years into our democracy.
Sure. Let's look at another case now. Last month, a grade 8 Johannesburg school teacher was alleged to have made racist remarks, was suspended by the school while investigations were still ongoing. Is that the best way for a school to act in dealing with the issue? And is the Commission also still investigating these allegations?
Indeed. And I think suspension is certainly one component, but what suspension does is it criminalizes the actions and the behavior of that particular individual. It doesn't address the underlying challenges in that particular school or community. And what's effectively required is a lot more discussion and engagement about race and the impact that race has. In the Supreme Court of Appeal case that was handed down last week, the woman involved in this matter said that when she was called the K word, it felt as, and she says that it took something away from her, that her dignity was impaired. And I think many black South Africans struggle with this on a daily basis. So beyond suspension, I think there's a lot more that needs to be done to try and build cohesiveness among black and white in South Africa.
Do you go back into a situation? Do you monitor a case once you've handed a ruling down? What happens then?
Indeed, and unfortunately there are certain limitations to what we can and cannot do, but in these sorts of cases we definitely go back, and in our recommendations we provide the Department of Basic Education with 6 months within which to implement a plan and to go back and ensure that the situation is properly monitored. We then go back and try and ensure that the department delivers on the recommendations and findings that we make. And we do this across the country, of course, by trying to monitor this on a regular basis, given that we deal with at least 10,000 cases a year, certainly a difficult task for any organization.
It certainly is. And I mean, when you talk about 10,000 cases a year, one can only imagine how you cannot learn in a racist environment. I mean, if you, as a learner, are subjected to these kind of things every single day, you're not going to learn.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, many of these young learners have to walk long distances to school, often come from very poor conditions, often have situations at home which exacerbate their inability to learn. And so this simply adds to the complexity around the schooling and education system, which ultimately results in children falling into what we have referred to as a poverty trap, where they are unable to finish their schooling education, they are unable to find a job, and then unable to contribute to the economy. So it's a vicious cycle which perpetuates itself, and racism certainly plays a very important and key role in unfortunately exacerbating these circumstances.
Before I let you go, I know I brought it up a little bit earlier in the program and I asked viewers to comment about it. I haven't got time to read the comments out here, but it certainly did cause quite a reaction. It's the story of this young grade 4 boy. He's 9 years old. He married a 62-year-old woman, and this was a story where he say they recently renewed their vows. The boy in grade 4 said his ancestors told him in a dream to marry, and he decided to marry a 62-year-old married mother of 5 children. Now, after this happened, his headmaster told him he's not allowed to come back to school. He's now officially been expelled, but the Department of Education is going to the school today to look into the situation. Where do we draw a line now between going against somebody's human right of an education, because that's exactly what this young boy does need. He needs an education, and yet culture and what's happening? I mean, this is a very delicate situation.
Absolutely, and it's probably the hardest kind of situation to deal with. So on the one hand, the Constitution allows you to respect cultural rights and the right to belong to a particular cultural grouping. But of course, where that culture violates another right, then there clearly is an issue that needs to be taken up. In this particular case, though, despite the fact that this young boy decided to marry an older woman, there's absolutely an obligation on the school to ensure that he continues his schooling. I think it's even more important that he completes his schooling given the situation that he finds himself in. The cultural issue, of course, is something that we continue to struggle with. We've also seen cases where young girls are married off through Ukutwala in the Eastern Cape in particular, and we've intervened in those cases. So we definitely find that this situation seems to be a rather unhealthy one. I think it's quite clear from anyone looking at the situation that it needs to be addressed. But in terms of this young child's access to basic education, it's certainly something that should never be taken away, despite the circumstances he finds himself in.
Thank you for talking to us. It's it's always a difficult conversation to have, but I like the way you handle it. Thank you for talking to us, Kayum Ahmed, who is the CEO of the South African Human Rights Commission. To file complaints, to get investigated, you visit the website?
We visit the website, sahrc.org.za, or contact any of our offices. We've got an office in every single province across the country.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for talking to us. sahrc.org.za. Visit the website. Nobody needs to go through racism of any kind, and you contact that Human Rights Commission if you feel that your rights are being violated. Let's take a break.